Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein expected to turn himself in. And with me now is Vinoo Varghese. He's a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. And he's going to sort of walk us through what's happening here this morning. So, you know, it seems like there have been all sorts of investigations that have been lingering for months now in regards to Harvey Weinstein. And suddenly we hear that he's turning himself in. We can presume that there was some sort of negotiation that has taken place prior to this?
Yes. There's already been talk, or it's been reported that there's already a bail package in place that's been agreed to between prosecutors. Initially, there was a report that it was $1 million, but just about 20 minutes ago, I saw something that said about $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we know he's a wealthy man, or at least was. So certainly you can understand why the bail would be that high. That's particularly high. I don't know. Is that?
That is a high.
Okay.
Certainly, that's definitely a high bail. But he's going to be restricted to probably his apartment with an ankle monitor brace. So.
Okay, so walk us through what's going to happen. He drives up and he gets out of this car. Then where does it go from there?
He's going to go into central booking. He's going to get printed. That's going to take a little. They're going to expedite the process. Normally, that whole process takes several hours for prints to come back. But imagine everything's being expedited because they want to get him into court by 9 or 9:30.
Wow, and then, so he has a hearing at 9, and what will take place during that hearing?
So my understanding is he's being arraigned on a criminal complaint, which is actually interesting, and I think the reason it's being done that way is to placate the NYPD. Because in normal circumstances on a case like this, which is high profile, is that a person like Weinstein would surrender himself to the DA's office and be processed by the DA.
I just want to interrupt you a little bit, Vinoo. We are seeing Harvey Weinstein now walking in, presumably with his attorneys. Looks like he's carrying a couple of books with him. A clean-shaven Harvey Weinstein, and actually sort of looks a little thinner as well. And there you go. So you can hear members of the media and probably others yelling his name, trying to get his attention. So this is the beginning of a whole new chapter in this. It started a year ago with allegations that began to build and build and build, and to the point where dozens and dozens of women came forward making allegations against him, many of them describing very similar circumstances in which they were called to hotel rooms for business meetings, or were pressured into sexual favors in exchange for work, and women who rebuffed him found themselves struggling in their career. He has denied any illegal activity, any acts of unwanted sex, but he has not denied some of the other behavior that maybe doesn't rise to the level of being charged. Why do you suppose it's New York that has managed to get him into the courtroom? We know there's an investigation happening in London. We know there's an investigation happening in Los Angeles. There's a federal investigation. What do you think it's happening here in New York today?
Well, I think the pressure was on Cy Vance's office, the Manhattan District Attorney's office, for quite a while, ever since the stories broke last fall. Vance has been criticized for his handling. They said that in 2015 he didn't prosecute a case involving an Italian model, and he's got a lot of criticism for that. And after this, Governor Cuomo set up a review of the office's procedure, or how it handled that case, which is extraordinary, by the way. It's extraordinary to do that, because it's also, to be frank, it's actually disturbing, because when politicians get in the way of law enforcement, you've got to question, why is he doing this? Certainly Governor Cuomo wanted a piece of the Harvey Weinstein pie, and he wanted to be aggressive and look like he's, on top of this. Everybody wants a piece of the Harvey Weinstein pie. That's why federal investigators are looking at this. It's a real stretch to bring a federal case against him.
Interesting. So to get to this point, though, would a grand jury have already listened to the evidence?
No, so apparently there's a grand jury investigating, but he's being arraigned today on a criminal complaint as opposed to an indictment. It's just a different procedural mechanism, and the reason it's doing it that way is because I think it's to placate the NYPD, which has been crossing, because when you surrender to the NYPD, there's a criminal complaint. It has to do with how you proceed.
Right.
So there's no grand jury action, but there's been a grand jury that's been commenced for a while now,
right.
and so I'm sure an indictment is imminent.
Okay, so no doubt this is a case that's of extreme interest to a number of groups, and it's certainly politically charged. And we've seen things change over the years with this is the case that launched the Me Too movement,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And the Time's Up movement, right? And so the attitude about these sorts of crimes has changed dramatically. You sound like you're saying that politics may be at play. How strong of a case do you think we have here?
Well, it remains to be seen, right? So they've been doing a lot of investigation. They're going to look into a lot of the civil settlements that have gone into, which they could use, you know, to bolster their case. Some of these things are, there are apparently a number of women who the acts preceded the statute of limitations, but on violent rapes, there's no longer a statute of limitations in New York. That was eliminated several years ago.
Right.
So if he's charged with a first-degree rape, which is forcible, violent, in essence, a violent sexual assault, there's no statute of limitations on that.
So often in cases like that, there's some sort of DNA evidence, maybe a witness. In many of these circumstances, these incidents happened in the privacy of a hotel room. It's been years now. Is this going to be a challenge? It's essentially he said, she said.
I think so. It will be.
Yeah.
What's concerning here, and it'll be interesting to see how the Manhattan DA proceeds on this, whether they try to bolster their case by calling in other women, like what happened in the Bill Cosby trial. One of the fundamental tenets, or a tenet of criminal law, is that character evidence isn't. You're not supposed to use evidence of a person's character to show they have a propensity to commit crimes. So in other words, if he's a bad guy, that doesn't mean that on this particular occasion that he committed a crime.
Right.
So in the Cosby case, for example, he was charged with assaulting one woman, but 5 other women were allowed to testify.
Right.
What's the purpose of a statute of limitations in that case? It's an end run around the statute of limitations. And I think that's something similar, I'm sure, is in the works here.
So do you think that perhaps because of the Me Too movement, the requirements in a case like this have shifted a little? That now a woman's word is a little stronger than it may have been prior to this?
Here's the thing, though, certainly I think the Me Too movement has brought this much more into media focus.
Right.
But I think whenever a man is accused of a sexual assault, there is a presumption of guilt, and it's been always. So whenever the allegation alone, like so, for example, if I'm telling somebody, "Oh, I'm defending this person, he's charged with a sexual assault," everybody's like, "Ooh," there's that look, and they assume that he's guilty already.
Right.
So there's always been a presumption of guilt. What's happening now? The Me Too movement really has a lot to do with workplace sexual harassment in that sense, and that's very positive. Obviously, that's brought these things out and show there's zero tolerance for that kind of behavior.
Right.
But what's really concerning here is that the spillover into the criminal law, right? So if the government is supposed to prove that somebody committed a crime, that he assaulted this woman, or in this case, I think there are 2 complainants.
Yeah.
Well, if you bring in all this other evidence, you're basically saying he's just a bad guy, but that doesn't mean that the case against them is necessarily strong, the case involving these women. So by doing that, and one of the things that there's a term in the law says, unduly prejudicial, right? So the question is, obviously, all this evidence is prejudicial. Like, it's, the acts, it's all going to look back. The question is whether it's unduly prejudicial. And that's for a judge to determine. But I imagine the DA will be very aggressive here. There's a lot of political pressure here to bring Harvey Weinstein down, and the Manhattan DA's office is the first one to get him before Los Angeles. I don't think he's going to be able to get to London, because they're going to have to extradite him, and he's surrendering his passport.
Oh, right. So he's not going anywhere. I just want to pivot back to Jerika, who's right in front of the courthouse there. Oh, we don't have Jerika yet. Okay. Well, as soon as we do, let me know. We'll go to Jerika Duncan. I wanted to ask you about one more thing that you sort of brought up. You talked about the agreements. A lot of these women, or some of these women, sign non-disclosure agreements, receive payment for that, and some of them have chosen to break that agreement. As an attorney, I'm wondering how you feel about that. You know, a lot of the conversation has been about how these agreements have been used to silence many people over the years and maybe allow predators to continue their behavior without ever sort of, facing a judge or being prosecuted in any way.
Look, the very fact that there's an agreement, the word agreement tells you that the parties have agreed, right? So there's been a meeting of the minds. If these people are getting paid, well, a lot of times, we've represented clients who there's a reason for a settle. They'll choose to settle because the cost, the damage to the reputation is so strong, and particularly here, forget a celebrity like Weinstein, but there are a number of professionals, they choose to settle something. That doesn't mean they're guilty of a crime, and and people have to remember that, and just I think to say that if you're getting millions of dollars to be silenced, well, I think the assumption is that you're being silenced, right? But you're getting paid, so you had a choice, right? Go to the police, take down Mr. Weinstein when it happened, or get a payday. And so I think that cuts both ways. So his lawyers are going to be able to say, look, these guys got paid. Now they're coming out, and because they all want a piece of the Harvey Weinstein pie. It's a big pie.
And prosecutors will say, well, why did he want to silence them if he didn't do anything wrong?
I think that's the counter to that is very easy. He's got a reputation to protect. The allegation alone is ugly enough that would damage his reputation. I mean, before all this stuff, before the news articles, well, there may have been murmurings, and it may have been an open secret in Hollywood about him until those articles appeared in the New York Times and the New Yorker back in October. He was a Hollywood legend.
He certainly was.